Welcome to the KUMB ModPod podcast, or should that be Modcast, where the KUMB moderating team come together to dissect and anatomise the latest happenings in the crazy world of West Ham United Football Club and beyond. This week, joining me on the show, which just happens to be episode 9, are KUMB team members Bristol Hammer, Rio, Gnome, and the Pink Palermo. Bristol Hammer back from a brief vacation. Where were you, Briz? Where have you been the last couple of weeks?
We were down in Sheldon in Devon, so I was off paddleboarding, kayaking, did a bit of fishing. It was really good, really relaxing.
Beautiful, beautiful part of the world. Certainly a lot better than Benfleet in the last couple of weeks, where it's just been a crime wave going on actually since the sun came out. But anyway, yeah, as you can probably tell by now, there are no special guests once again this week, as we are all saving them for a show worth participating in. So it is that we shall kick off tonight's show with a look at, in the words of Preview Percy, the wild and wacky world of association football, in our section, which we've imaginatively entitled "A Week's a Long Time in Football." It's been a busy week once again, with the pre-season kicking right in now. Transfer rumours. We've even had some transfers. Leeds have bought about 100 players in the last week, or something like that. Not many other clubs have moved. West Ham, with just the one signing so far, who is Thomas Souček. But there could be somebody going out this week, if rumours are correct. We only brought him into the club last year for £8 million. A Swiss striker, Albion Ayeti, looks like he's on his way to Celtic. He's barely kicked a ball for West Ham so far. Gnome, is that a good deal for West Ham, or do you think we should have persevered with him a little bit longer, assuming it does go through, of course?
Is this likely to be a permanent deal or on loan? Because the last thing I read was a potential loan situation.
Yeah, it's initially on loan.
Yeah,
with a view, there is apparently a £5.5 million agreement in there, which kicks in after he's played a certain number of games. And according to a couple of sources, it's a particularly low number of games, something like 10 or 15 rather than the regular, 30, 35 games.
So about 8 seasons at West Ham then?
Yes, basically, yeah.
I think it's a case of cutting losses, isn't it? We've only seen sort of glimpses of him, but the manager will see him every day in training. Bringing him on in the 89th minute when you're 2-0 down, he's never going to have a chance to sort of particularly shine, but
sure.
When we have brought him on, we've always been we've been beyond desperate when we brought him on. I suspect he's not a Premier League standard footballer. Scottish Premier League, well, maybe. And I think you or I could probably get a game up there for many teams. So it's cutting your losses time, isn't it? It's getting him off the wage. Well, I don't know what his wages are, but you get him off the wage bill. You get a few bob in, and to add to whatever transfer kitty, if any, we have.
Yes, of course. That's the big question, isn't it? Have we got anything at all? Thank you, Gnome. And Rio, how you doing, buddy? Good to see you.
Not so bad, thank you, mate.
Good. You're in agreement there that, it's probably one of those that perhaps another Hugill situation, really, where it was just a poor transfer deal and, as Gnome says, better off letting him go now than persevering?
I just think with his pedigree coming from the Swiss League, the Swiss International, he's banged goals in over there.
Mm-hmm.
And now our lack of numbers up front, I think he might have been given more of an opportunity, to be honest, but obviously, neither Moyes nor Pellegrini really fancied him enough. It's a shame for him, really. But we clearly need to create funds from somewhere, and he's the fall guy. So let's see who we can get for whatever pittance we get for him,
Well, that's it. I mean, and I guess if it's a loan deal initially, we're not going to be getting an awful lot up front. But I guess the point being that we're going to save a reasonable slab of, our wages. Depending, of course, on how much he's on. Pinky, good evening, sir. How are you?
Yeah, I'm basting away here. It's 30 degrees in the part of the world I am, and it's been that way for the best part of a week. So, yeah, I'm good, thank you.
Are you not a fan of the sun, sir?
23 stone, ginger hair. Take a wild guess.
Not the greatest combination, I guess. Anyway, Albion Ayeti came in last year, £8 million. We signed him from Basel. Came with a good pedigree. Scored, actually, in his first 2 games he played this season. I think it was one for Switzerland and one for his club before he made the move. But unfortunately, we haven't seen him put the ball in the net at all for West Ham. And chances are we're not going to. What's going on there with that transfer?
I think file under what waste of money. What a waste of time and money. And a waste of a year for a young footballer. And how many times do you have to say it? If you change your manager every 5 minutes, someone likes the look of a player, next one doesn't. You get to the stage where you've spent all your money and it's, well, we know we need another striker, so we've got like £4.10 left. What can we get for that?
Yep.
It's just, how many times do we have to say, do it properly or don't bother? The club would have been better off taking that fee and say, do you know what? What we're going to do as West Ham United is we're going to fund 6 football specials to come back from midweek away games for our supporters. And we're going to make ourselves a very popular board of directors by doing that. But no, instead, they waste whatever limited funds the club has, buying a player who barely features, satisfying nobody, not the player, not the supporters, not the manager, not the club. And then we end up shipping him out on probably less than favourable terms for West Ham United to the Scottish Premier League. Seriously. So you're going to go from the English Premier League to Scotland.
Yeah.
There is a gulf in class, and I'm afraid you compare that with what Arsenal did when they looked at signing a player from the Scottish Premier League, and they watched Tierney for 5 years. 5 years they watched him as a development player in Scotland before taking the plunge. What do? We just looked at a list of available players. Oh, £8 million, we'll have some of that. Waste of money. And I feel a bit sorry for the player.
Yeah.
It's just money down the drain.
Do you blame the board for that one then, rather than Pellegrini and Huselos, who we're told were in charge of transfers last summer?
Only one person signs the checks. That's Mr. Sullivan. And I'm afraid, he would have to sit down with the manager and say, tell me why a player that we're going to put £8 million towards is going to succeed in this league, and justify. Now, if Pellegrini's done that and the chairman's backed him, fair enough. But it all looks a little bit of a last-minute panic buy because we had a spot missing in the squad. We've shipped out Hernandez and then brought in a Jetty, and it looked more like cost control rather than squad development to me. Yeah. And I just think there's better uses of the club's money than that.
Okay, fair dues. I mean, I guess you're right. The savings by bringing in a Jetty as opposed to Hernandez, who was probably on somewhere near 4 or 5 times as much in terms of salary, would have been considerable. But thanks, Pinky. Briz, your thoughts on Ayeti? Has he ever really had a chance at West Ham?
I don't think so, but I think it's a really important point about who's actually making the transfers at West Ham United.
Yeah.
I think Pinky made a great point about the person signing the cheques. I don't think David Sullivan signs a cheque for any player unless he fancies him.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in a kind of romantic sense. I mean, kind of, he's always said
that'd be interesting, wouldn't it?
Yeah, well, yeah. But he's always said he's had an eye for a player, and I think he fancies himself as director of football. And I think increasingly he's been taking that role over a number of years. And you look at some of the players we have shipped out on relatively low fees that haven't featured. They've usually got his hand all over them and saying, I just took a punt on this player. I think we're in real trouble financially this year, and I think we're going to have to ship out to ship in. Okay. And I think this is only the beginning of where we're trying to get rid of players to bring in other players. I don't think there's any war chest for David Moyes. I think he's going to have to generate all the income he wants, and I think he's probably looking at something like 25 to 35% of anything we get for players, with the rest going back into the club. And I don't think that bodes well for West Ham this year. I think we can see a lot of players going out and a lot of punts coming in this year. And I wouldn't be surprised to see a few of the free transfers that are on offer as well. So for me, I think we've got another season of this coming up.
Okay. On that point, actually talking about the there being no war chest for David Moyes, there is a story going around right now that's sort of emanating from Germany to say that West Ham might potentially have defaulted on yet another payment for Sebastian Haller. Rio, what do you think about that? I mean, we'll come to Pinky in a second. We know what Pinky's view on this before was, with West Ham potentially, he feels, looking to deliberately default in order to force a resale. But what's your take on that situation there? Are we really that skint?
I think we are. And I just think it's another statement of just how financially poor we are managed. And also, it's another statement that clubs in Europe will not deal with us if this carries on. We've alienated bought in Lisbon in the past over the Carvalho transfer.
Yep.
We've alienated other clubs, similar kind of circumstances. And if this rumour is true, we're going to alienate a big side in Germany over a big money fee. Now, this sends out all the wrong messages to all the wrong people. And we'll be we're cutting off every avenue possible to sign decent players in the future if we carry on this way. So it's making West Ham kind of laughing stock again. And the poor thing for me is the word again. Yep.
Yes, of course. As you rightly mentioned there, Carvalho, that whole debacle went on for some considerable time with some particularly unsavoury comments, I think you'd say, being shared between their chairman and ours at the time. I won't repeat those because I'm sure you'll all remember what they were. Thank you, Rio. Pinky, it was you who suggested, as I mentioned there at the top of that section, that you had a theory that West Ham might be looking to, as I say, deliberately default on this transfer to offload the French striker. You still going?
Yeah, I mean, it just smacks of, if we don't pay them any money, at what point will they say, well, we want our player back?
Yeah.
At what point will they cut their losses and say, do you know what? Because without that money, we can't go and buy a player. We as Eintracht can't go and buy a player. And if we need, a striker, why not go and get the striker who we still own because we haven't been paid for?
Yeah.
And I think it could be as simple as the chairman, our chairman, almost trying to encourage, that sort of bid from Frankfurt to get their player back, and could be wrong in that. But when you see what we've done a number of times when we've shipped players out to clubs and then we've taken them back, and I'm thinking, Randolph would be the classic. That's the classic. No money needs change hands. No new money needs commitment. It's just, well, we'll cancel it off what you were going to pay us. And if you're managing your business on a strict cash flow basis, it's the sort of stroke you pull. And I would put some money now on Haller lining up for Frankfurt against Bielefeld for the opening Bundesliga game on September the 19th.
Okay,
that's where I'd put my money. I think there's more chance of him playing for them than for us.
Interesting stuff. Well, of course, time will tell whether there's anything in that or not. Gnome, good to have you back. We lost you briefly there, buddy. You are on mute, I think, at the moment, so we need you to hit that button before we can
there we go.
hear your sage words on this situation. We're just talking about Sebastian Haller and the fact that, West Ham seem to have defaulted on another payment if reports emanating from Germany this evening are indeed correct.
Yeah. See what happened last time out. When the first sort of payment was defaulted on, we were told, given sage words, saying it wasn't anything to do with the fact we didn't have any money, and we really had the money, but there were certain contractual things which, as is usually the way with these things, conveniently are commercially sensitive. But there were some contractual reasons for not making that payment. Last month, wasn't it, or whatever? And it's all been sorted out now, and nobody had anything to worry about. And then a couple of weeks after that, there was a comment to the effect that we still hadn't made that payment that had been under debate. But I think it was a statement or a comment from somebody connected to Frankfurt along the lines of, well, we're sure that we're sure it'll all be sorted come August when the next payment's due. It'll all be wrapped up in that.
That's
now, I haven't been on German media to have a look, and so caveat or any comments with whatever the German equivalent of allegedly is. But if we're not paying that again, then, well, it rather sort of makes that statement that, you know, it wasn't a money thing. It was just there was some underlying contractual term that needed sorting out. I'm not entirely sure I believe that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I wasn't entirely sure I believed it at the time, but you know, benefit of the doubt,
I'm not sure many of us were. Thank you. No, Breeze, it was, of course, your good self who alerted us to this latest development just before we came on air. Do you agree with Pinky? Do you think this, you know, if this is true, could this be the end of Haller at West Ham?
Well, again, my German's not great, but I've just kind of picked up the bits that I could find out of it that could kind of translate it through Google. Yeah, absolutely. I think we're trying to do this with a number of players. I think Anderson as well, we're looking at trying to ship him back to Italy. So I think maybe this is going to be one of the strategies, is to write off some of the transfer fees that we've got outstanding. I was looking back at the financials from Pellegrini's first season, and it said that in 2020 that we would owe 44 million due this summer. It was due back in outstanding transfer fees. Now, given the fact that we were in serious trouble in the last set of accounts in terms of what we had to spend, and what we had, you know, spare down the back of the sofa, I think this is probably a strategy that's trying to head some of that off. And again, with COVID, I think the club's really going to struggle this season financially. I wouldn't be surprised to see us cutting our costs. You know, being one of the first clubs to come out, get rid of some of the staff, which I think would be wrong, cut some of our costs, and really play it down to, you know, we're doing okay, but we're just trying to manage the club. I think we're going to be in real trouble this year.
Worrying signs indeed. One of the players, of course, who has been mooted as being a potential departure this summer is the jewel in the crown, I suppose you would say, young Declan Rice. And within the last 24 hours, there was a lot of posts on social media from fans of that mob from West London down there in Chelsea, almost crowing about the fact that they thought he was on his way to Stamford Bridge on the basis that he was pictured in Mykonos with some Chelsea first-team players and Didier Drogba as well, wasn't it, at a restaurant. Of course, the fact that Ryan Fredericks was, of course, in the same photograph seems to have been overlooked by those Chelsea fans who one would assume wouldn't be particularly keen on taking our errant right-back with him to Stamford Bridge. But Rio, you know, is this just a case of lots of smoke without any fire and just Declan Rice being on holiday with his friends, do you think? Of course, Mason Mount was there.
Yeah, no, it's going to be, isn't it? And there's always going to be a link with Chelsea because of his friendship with Mount.
Yeah.
He played his youth football there. And I dare say it might happen in a year or so's time. But the boy's on holiday, you know? He's going to go away with his friends. He doesn't want to... When I went to Dorset this weekend. I haven't been linked with Bournemouth. So, like...
you have, Rio.
Yeah, you're not
turn them down.
This afternoon. Yeah, it's a very fair point. Breeze, you know, I mean, we know Lampard likes Rice, and let's be honest, I doubt there's a Premier League manager who wouldn't like him in their squad for next season. But do you see anything in that at all? Is it just, you know, complete nonsense?
Well, interestingly, just before the end of the season, I know someone who works at Chelsea. They were saying to me that there had been a tentative inquiry made. A fee of 70 million was quoted, and they balked at that and kind of backed off. So that was as much as I know. That's kind of half informed. I can see Declan Rice going. Again, depends on the club's financial situation. I think Declan wants to be playing at a higher level. I think he's worth playing at a higher level. Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one because we'd love to keep the boy here. I mean, I think he's such a talent, such a talent. But honestly, is West Ham big enough to keep him? And I think in this modern transfer era now, where we've got the big six clubs at the top spending all the money, I can just see him going. I think if the money's enough, he'll go.
Okay. Pinky, we know that David Moyes has said in the past that he wants to build his new team around Declan Rice. Do you think the chairman or the chairmen would dare sell him this summer?
I think they'd prefer not to, because all the ramifications that would bring down around them.
Yeah.
An already disgruntled supporter base seeing the jewel in the crown being sold and a young player being sold.
Mm-hmm.
Then be seeing Mark Noble in what was effectively going to be his last season. So the old guard is retiring, the young gun coming through is sold, and we end up with a team of what? And those for the chairman, then you'll be faced with desperately trying to sell some tickets, desperately trying to have some image to promote the club with, because they've traded very heavily on Noble for the last dozen years. They'd want to use Rice for those sorts of purposes. So, and then you factor in that it's probably not the best time to be selling your crown jewels, because not that many clubs are cash rich. Therefore, the price is always going to be suppressed. So I think you'd rather not sell him this summer. The problem, of course, is how deep a hole is the club in financially? How deep a hole are other clubs in financially? And we've seen the quite appalling behaviour by Arsenal Football Club this week, making 55 employees redundant, whilst at the same time having a single player earning £350,000 a week, and a player who didn't take the pay cut along with the rest of the Arsenal players. And they're having to do it because they're going to miss out on £96 million of match day income, the way things look.
Mm-hmm.
West Ham United, it's not quite as severe, it's only £27 million. But it's a financial hole, and sometimes you have to do deals you don't want to, because otherwise the club's in a real pickle. And my fear is Mr. Sullivan probably doesn't want to sell him. He may end up having to sell him, and it won't be at the 70 million price that Bristol's just quoted. It's going to be considerably less, and the chairman will do the best he can to build it up and say, look, I've got a great price and all the rest of it, but now is not the time to be selling your crown jewels. It's not a good market, and I fear for it. And and the player, the other side of the coin is, he can go on holiday with Mason Mount and whoever. Is Mount getting a game every week at Chelsea? Are Chelsea the right club for Mount? Is Declan just going to go and play football with his mate and then find a week later his mate shipped out to another club? Yeah. So I think Rice has got a bit of thinking to do as well. So we'll see. I hope he stays, but I really fear for the club's finances at the minute. I really do.
Yeah. Okay. I think once again, time will tell. No, on the point that of the pictures being taken, is it perhaps a little bit of naivety from Rice to let himself be put in that situation, or is that just a case of leave the kid alone? He's having fun. He's 21 and he's with his mates.
Yeah, he's 21. He's away in Greece and having a good time with his mates. It's not like this is the first time he's been on holiday with his mate Mason Mount, is it? I mean, it is rather amusing that there are Chelsea supporters willing to accept this as conclusive proof that that he's definitely on his way. Sort of thing. I mean, on that basis, we're having Mount and Drogba as well. Then the reputation for dim supporters has always rested with Tottenham, but when you see that sort of thing coming through,
makes you wonder.
No, it's not naive. It's on holiday with his mates. It's not a new thing. I've seen photographs of players up and down the country who are mates with people in other teams going off on holiday, and it's still
a nothing story then, basically.
Yeah, but if it keeps the sort of the heart of thinking at Stamford Bridge happy for a day or two, well, fine. I'm all in favour of it. It gives us something to giggle at.
Well, it certainly has in the last 24 hours anyway. Moving swiftly on, Pinky, just a few moments ago there, referred to the disgruntled fan base, and someone who's really taken that on board in the last few months has been the supporters group Hammers Utd, who, as we know, staged two very high-profile marches before lockdown kicked in at the beginning of March, the second of which attracted more than 8,000 supporters. Now, Hammers United last week or the week before were involved with negotiations with West Ham with regards to the season ticket renewal policy and the SAB version 3, which is something that they're working hard on, which will of course be independent if they get their way. There was a little bit of fallout this week from that meeting. Stephen Tross, as he's known to us and KUMB, Cross, the secretary at Hammers United, recorded a video on Monday in which he was quite critical of the club for their lack of communications since those meetings took place. And he was insinuating that the reason for that was because both he and Andy Byrne, who is also on the committee at Hammers United, took part in a Knees Up Mother Brown Q&A session, which our very own Pinky, who's here, took part in also the week before last. The word was that the club were unhappy that they'd done that when they felt that ground was being made between the two, and common ground was being found anyway. And Hammers United were quite upset, and there were kind of rumours or suggestions, perhaps from Mr. Cross, that they may look to start another protest, which there was, of course, one planned for the final game of the season against Aston Villa, and talk that potentially even more fans than the 8,000 plus who attended the last one, the Walk Along the Greenway, would attend. That apparently has upset the club, and I can report a little bit of an exclusive, I suppose. I mean, we know that the club have since been in touch with Hammers United in an attempt to try and smooth things out a little bit and resolve those issues. I suppose it is perhaps a shame that it has come to this, in the sense that it was perhaps unnecessary for Hammers United to have to sort of threaten another protest if they didn't really get what they were looking for. But I should also point out, actually, while we're here, that when we KUMB ran a news story earlier this week covering Tross's statement, and we did state in there that we had reached out to the club for comment. They hadn't got back to us at the time of publication because, to clarify, we only reached out to them shortly before it was published. But I can confirm that the club did get in touch with me after that. We haven't really had the chance to discuss it, but just to make it absolutely clear, they did reach, they did come back to us on that. But looking at the whole story, Pinky, as I say, I'll come to you first because you were involved in that question and answer session. Andy and Tross during that meeting, and Sue, of course, from the West Ham United Supporters Independent Supporters Association, were all talking about the problems with communication with the club, and it looks like perhaps they hadn't learned anything at all after all. And here we are again, having to sort of, fight really to get anything done.
Yeah, I mean, this has been a problem that's been developing not over 6 months or a couple of years. This has been a problem almost from day one, and the club under the current ownership haven't been clear about who to communicate with, what to communicate about, haven't really understood what I would call your typical West Ham United supporter. And in my opinion, they completely underestimated the impact the stadium relocation would have on the relationship between the club and the supporters. Mm-hmm. Because the whole way it was done, and if you go back to the start of the process when people were being invited to meetings but having to sign NDAs, hand their mobile recording devices, telephones in,
yep.
All sorts of criticisms made about if somebody published any notes or comments about it. So all the way back to those early days, the club have been desperately trying to control the message, and say this is the version of events that we want out. Well, the reality is, what the supporters want, and the version of events that the supporters want, is the truth, is honesty, just basic transparency. And I think most of our supporters, I've heard plenty of bad news in their lives. A little bit more isn't going to upset them, but what does upset them is when they are potentially misled, or they believe they've been misled about something that has very serious consequences for their Saturday afternoon's enjoyment. And so the club have got a long track record of really not covering themselves in glory in this. And I think this latest episode, I think anyone who watched that Q&A as a fair-minded observer saw, or would have seen, reasonable debate, no ranting, no name-calling, nothing unpleasant, just West Ham United supporters saying, here are our views. This is the way we see it. Now, other people would have other views, and that's fine. But the fact of the matter is the club consistently fail to put people forward to engage. They consistently fail to address issues that supporters groups present to them. And this is what you get. And as was pointed out in that Q&A, you could ignore the 20-odd thousand people that log on to KUMB and say that's just a few deranged people around the world.
Mostly true.
But when 8,500 turn up on the Greenway in a protest, that's reality. That's the reality. And for the club not to accept that reality is a grievous error, in my opinion. And, do they learn? I've got, and you talk to them all individually. I don't think David Sullivan is a nasty man. I've spoken to him on a number of occasions. He's a thoroughly pleasant chap to talk to on a one-to-one basis. So there's nothing personal in these things that the supporters are saying, but there's frustration. There's frustration that the club, for whatever reason, seem unable to engage positively with supporters and deliver on things that the supporters believe they were promised that were going to happen as a result of the move that clearly haven't. And, for my money, the hole's getting deeper, and it's just, well, where do we go here? It's very sad. It's very sad.
Yes, all seems quite unnecessary a lot of the time. Thanks, Pinky. Rio, you and I sat next to each other at some of those old SAB meetings. I mean, Pinky's there referred to the occasion when, we turned up and we had to sign NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, and were asked to leave any recording devices at the door before we went in, which was obviously quite unusual. Given all that, and what's happened since, and the problems that Hammers United have faced, do you have any faith in an SAB version 3 and that it will truly represent the supporters?
Well, as we know, the first version of the SAB was purely an exercise to skim off what talent there was in certain areas of West Ham fans available. With a new design badge, very cheaply done, because someone selected on that board wasn't a graphic designer. They picked off the cream of people's talents to try and manipulate a cheap deal. The second incarnation, I've seen fairer Russian elections than how this particular board was selected, handpicked by a certain person who I won't name, but was clearly in the club's pocket, just to say it politely.
Allegedly,
yeah, I'll say yes. And so, have I got faith in a third version? On face value, no. If it's done in the right manner, consulting the various like Weezer, Hammers United, fine, I will go along with it. But judging by past experience, personal experience, I've got no faith whatsoever. And as Pinky's alluded to, they've got a disgruntled support. All it would take would be a little bit of constructive discussion, I'm not saying bend over and just accept everything that the fans want. That's never going to happen. But a little bit of dialogue, a bit of constructive discussion, actually take on board what people are feeling, rather than trying a North Korean style move to like brainwash certain elements into believing that their version is the only version. You know?
Okay.
Dialogue.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. No, thank you, Rio, for that. Gnome, Pinky mentioned there, talking about David Sullivan, said he's a perfectly affable chap when you speak to him in person. I mean, you and I have been fortunate enough to be invited to the inner sanctum, you know, with some of the directors before. Karen Brady, of course, invited us and other content creators into meetings at the Olympic Stadium, and was perfectly pleasant, and, you know, took on board what we said at the time. Whether or not much of it really sort of translated into reality afterwards is questionable. But the same question to you, really. Do you have any faith that Hammers United are going to be able to get what they want in terms of, you know, fully true independent supporters on that think tank, I guess you'd call it, SAB3?
I take issue a little bit with what you just said about stuff being taken on board.
Okay.
The one meeting I went to, I think you couldn't make it, but it was one very cold night, sort of November, December time. And there were various contact. To be honest, I can't remember who half the other people were there.
Right.
But some of the people there were clearly quite happy to be there to a certain degree. I mean, I remember getting dogs abuse from one or two of the people that were out there because, you know, I said I'd had a bit of a moan. And, you know, the irony was that one of the people who had a go at me, their first question or their first statement was, "We're always happy to publicise the good work that the board does." And while we were all waiting for the punchline, it didn't come. I can remember saying at that meeting, this is something that I personally said, so if anyone else wants to take credit for it, fine, I don't care. But we were asked the question, what could the club do to improve its image, the club and the board, to improve its image amongst supporters? Very valid question, because clearly, to this day, the board hasn't got a great image. You've got 8,000 people marching. That should tell you something. And most people their answer was, well, if you came on our video chat, whatever, and did a question and answer, then that would turn the crowd around. The crowd would respect you for that. And right, you know, not if it's as stage managed as this meeting is. And when it got to me, it said, well, you know, the Baroness said to me, well, yeah, you've been moaning on behalf of more people. Yeah, what do you think? And I said, I think you've got a problem to turn the image around, because at the moment, what seems to be happening is that the club is, with its supporters, lurches from one public relations crisis to another.
Yep.
And nothing seems to change. And we then had a debate where the Baroness said to me something along the lines of, no, we don't have, no, name one. What public relations crisis? So, you know, I just quoted the infamous, "This is the greatest stadium move of all time" comment. And her response to that was, well, financially it was. And I said, yeah, but look at the state we're in at the moment, and you know, nobody's happy. So yeah, if you're just thinking about it in pounds, shillings and pence, there's your problem. You're considering the business side of things. I don't disagree that you have to do that. You know, it's not a charity. We've got to stay in business. We've got, you know, that's how things work. But you've got to have that one eye on, you know, if you're running a business, keeping your customers happy. So now, that was, how many years ago was that? When did we move in? How long have we been there?
4 or 5 years ago, I guess now. It was some time, wasn't it?
And I've suggested that we keep having these PR crises. What's happened this season, start of this season? Okay, COVID-19, unprecedented, and I don't deny for a moment that it's a difficult thing for everybody to run a club. And yeah, we need money. We're not paying the Haller fees, apparently. So we need money. What happens? The season ticket thing. Pay us for your season ticket for games, and if you don't get to see any, we might give you some money back. Okay, they did revise that shortly, but surely think about it. But they said they liaised with supporters on that. Clearly, they hadn't, or not nearly enough. And it was only after sort of a backlash. Why have the backlash? Why not liaise? Why not speak to supporters? Why not come up with something that's mutually acceptable to all parties, and then announce it?
Yeah.
Rather than this sort of constantly having to backtrack and so yeah, you said, well, things got taken on board. I think the one thing that I can palpably point at and say, yeah, that came out of that meeting is when we've gone to games since then, you notice all the people with the flags around with all the different crests, and somebody said, yeah, if we had flags with all our old crests, that would be a little bit more of a link to our history. And of course, yeah, they've paid for a few bob, but yeah.
Yeah, it's the easy gains. I guess that's what you're saying. It's the easy things to do that have been accepted, rather than anything that would take a great deal of foresight or investment.
Yeah. So but we still lurch from these crises, one crisis to another, and talk. I mean, as Tross was saying, he got fed up. It is a shame we weren't able to touch base with them before that, when they came back after it had been published. And hopefully you're going to get back in touch with them, Graham, and try and keep that line of connection open. Because if you can have a sensible conversation, then have it.
Well, I mean, as you know, we've always been open to any discussions with the club. It wasn't us that cut those particular lines. I mean, you know the story. You've been at the heart of it. I've always said my telephones. I'll always take a call from whoever at the club. The same as I'm sure Tross at Hammers United and Sue at WHU ISA.
I mean, my personal situation is it's all a bit weird, because I was as you know, I mean, whilst you personally weren't welcome at press conferences, I carried on going. And there was a pass for me every week. I'd email, okay for a pass, and they'd come back, and there was a pass waiting for me, and I'd cover that. And then a few matches at the last season, I got an email saying, who else do you write for other than KUMB? And I said, well.
And you said, and he's frozen.
To be continued.
We'll find out. Has Gnome been taken out?
Judy Sender's team.
We'll find out very soon. Breeze, let me come to you just to round this section off, because we've been going a little bit longer than expected. Tross obviously quite unhappy there, speaking on behalf of Hammers United. We'll try and get Gnome back, by the way. Send someone around to knock on his door to make sure he's okay. I mean, Tross was quite unhappy at the way the club had reacted. But do you think it's irreconcilable, the differences between the two? Or, do you think the club really can change and win the support of the fans back, really, I guess?
Well, I'm a bit worried now about the club's reach, seeing them go off air like that quite quickly. But I think, the two chairmen are quite an age now where really they should be looking to hang it up. And they have said previously, we're going to hand it on to the younger generation. I think that probably now's as good a time as any to start doing that, whether it's gradual or full takeover. I'm not sure they understand the modern media environment that's taking place now. When you've got Twitter, you've got Facebook, you've got Instagram, you've got all these instant messages where things are posted and then responded to almost immediately. I still think they're living a little bit in that kind of paper media empire that they were part of. And I wonder now whether the best way to start repairing some of that damage with the fan base is to start handing over to, if Jack's going to be the guy who's going to be chairman of the board, then start handing over to him now. Start handing off those responsibilities. If David's going to be on board, we don't know whether it's going to be David and Jack, or we don't know whether David Gold's going to hand off to his daughters and whether they'll sell or not sell. We don't know what the situation is there. They're not getting any younger, and I think that it's about time that that's a way of actually trying to reach out to some of the fan base, saying this is a change now, we're going to start a new era, maybe handing across. I'm not sure how much of a control freak David Sullivan is and how much whether he would embrace that. But that's what he's previously said, and this might be a good way to start transitioning that.
Okay, good stuff. Just as you're finishing there, I see we've got Gnome back once again.
Sorry,
We did fear for your safety briefly there, Gnome. We thought you might have been sabotaged by agents of the club, but fortunately,
threatened me with a soggy meat pie or something. Sorry,
good to have you back. Anyway, no, we you know, I think we're all in agreement. There's a lot more that can be done by the club, but you know, credit where it's due. As we always say on KUMB, we always try to be fair. They have started to speak to the fans at last. This is what we've been asking for many years. And hope that this version 3 of the advisory board, or the supporters association, whatever they're going to call it, is truly independent, is controlled by the fans, and is truly representative, because I think that's what most of us have been asking for. So a couple of other things. I'm not going to touch on these now because time's pushing on a little bit, and I'm going to lose my bet with Pinky that we're going to beat last week's time. It looks like that's a lost cause already, but just a couple of other things. There was a vote this week by the 20 Premier League member clubs over whether we should continue with 9 subs next year and 5 usable subs. The first vote went 10 for and 10 against. That was for the 9 subs rule, and the 5 usable subs went 11-9 in favour of reverting to the original system of only 3 usable subs. Of course, you need 14 votes in a Premier League vote for a motion to be passed, so neither were passed, so we're going back to the old system after a few months testing. And I'm sure let's just have a hands up. Is everyone in agreement with that? I certainly am anyway. I think it's everyone's in agreement. Good stuff. And finally, just touching on briefly the Jack Leslie campaign, which was seeking to erect a statue in honour of the or what would have been England's first black player in 1925. Apparently was told that he was ruled out of selection purely on the basis of his skin colour for a game against Ireland. What's that? 95 years ago. Now, the Jack Leslie campaign have been raising funds to erect a statue in his memory, and I'm delighted to report that yesterday, I think it was, they confirmed that they had hit their target of £100,000. So a statue should be going up in the near future near Plymouth's ground, which I believe, is it Home Park, Plymouth's ground?
Yeah.
Home Park at Plymouth. So that's good. Next thing, of course, is to get due recognition for our very own Jack Leslie. Of course, was from Canning Town and didn't play for West Ham, but was in the boot room in the days of Bobby Moore, Jeff Hurst. So he did end up back here. But one of our very own, John Charles, Charlo, as he was known to fans and friends alike, was the very first black player to represent England at any level. He featured for the under-18s in a friendly in Israel in 1962, thus becoming the first black player to represent his country. It wasn't even in the record books until very recently. We have been pushing the club to do something to perhaps recognise it. We'll see what happens there. But John's son, Mitch, gave an interview to KUMB fairly recently where he talked quite extensively about that and his hopes for to have his dad's achievements recognised. You can see that on our YouTube channel if you're interested anyway. So that's it. A week's a long time in football, and that's about the longest time we've spent on that particular section.
Already. For next week.
Anyway, we're going to move swiftly on. Something we had hoped to talk about last week, which we couldn't talk about, didn't get round to, because we ran over a little bit, was memorabilia. We wanted to talk about all those little trinkets and things that you might have picked up relating to football over the years. Your most treasured piece of memorabilia, or the piece that you've lost and most wished that you'd kept over the years. So I'm just going to go around the panel and just see what they particularly hold dear in terms of it might be essentially worthless, but might just hold very special memories. So Briz, I'm going to start with you, buddy, on this particular section. Memorabilia, West Ham or otherwise. Is there anything that you've got that you absolutely treasure, or something that you wish you'd kept?
Yeah, I've got a football boot signed by Dean Ashton, which is one of my most treasured possessions.
Do you know what game it was from?
Sorry?
Do you know what game it was from?
No, it was sent to me by mates. I'm not quite sure. It's a white football boot with gold on it, and it was sent, and it's signed by Dean Ashton and sent over to me. Which for some reason is just, I think it's just because it was Ashton that I wanted to keep it, and it really means a bit to me. And I'm not quite sure why. It's just one of those things I'm loath to get rid of. I think the one thing I've got, which I was quite sent to me direct by Karen Brady actually, was a signed Avram Grant team sheet. This is a photograph and team sheet signed by the entire team, and I keep looking at that and thinking, oh my God, what did I do with it? But yeah, we've done a bit of charity work in the school, and I was working with Leroy Senior around Red Card Against Racism and stuff.
Yeah.
And I wrote to West Ham and said to them, you know, this is what we've been doing. I'm working with Leroy, and is there anyone else who wants to come to the school and do some presentation? And she sent some stuff for the school, which was bits of kit and bit, and fair play to them for doing that.
Yeah.
But she sent me the signed team photo and team sheet from Maverick Grant squad, and I think I've kind of looked at it and went, okay, this is a bit of fun. But yeah, that's sitting there next to me, football boot with Dean Ashton. So I know which one I'd rather have.
Do you recall what game that was from? The team sheet, was it? Oh, he was only here for a season, wasn't he?
You know, I've not looked at it since we've got. I've had the photo. I'm going to put it in a box, and it goes in a box. I've got a signed pendant, and I've got a signed one of these big kind of player programs, signed with Billy Bonds and kind of all the old players. Like, I keep everything in a big box there, so I've not really dragged it out to have too much of a look at it. But yeah, things that you get. That's a random. I mean, fair play, to be fair to the club for setting that out. Yeah. It's, you know, as we know, all professional clubs get inundated with requests like this, so it's very difficult to keep everyone happy. But a very very interesting choice anyway. Gnome, what about you? You must have picked up some bits that you particularly value over the years, or stuff that you wish you still had.
Yeah, I mean, I think my prized kind of possession is I've got a framed couple of pages from the Cup semi-final programme where we beat Borough, which have got the 2 pages and the ticket and the cheque that I got paid for writing the 2 pages by the people, the publishers of the programme. Yeah. I've also got several copies over there in an envelope of the final programme, but I couldn't quite bring myself to do the same with that, so they're just sitting there in an envelope. On
that quickly, they must have sent us a load of those, because as some of you will be aware, I'm moving home soon, so I've been going through the loft and getting all my stuff together, and I found about 10 of those FA Cup semi-final programmes, so they must have sent us a ton of them at one point.
They said to me, for the semi-final, they said, "Oh, we'll pay you." I think it was 125 quid for the article, and I've never been paid to write anything before. I mean, yeah, I think plenty have paid me to stop writing, but that's another matter. But so they said, "Oh, and we'll send you some programs. How many do you want?" I said, "Oh, how many can I have?" And they said, "Oh, we'll send you 5." I thought, well, that's fair enough. And so then when it got to the final. They rang me up after the semi-final and said, "Oh, we liked what you did for the semi-final. Can you write something for the final programme?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Oh, we'll go up to, I think it's 175 quid for the final." So yeah, I should have an agent, shouldn't I? And what they did was, the funny thing was that they forgot they'd paid me for the semi-final programme. So they also paid me 125 quid for that. So I got paid twice for the semi-final. I did own up. You may remember Dave Hall, Goes to 11, at the time used to work for. He was editor of 442, which was the same publishing company. Mm-hmm. And I rang him up because I'm an honest chap, and I said, "Look, you've overpaid me." And he said, "Oh," he says, "that's accounts for you." He said, "You rung me up. You told me, he said it was worth more anyway, so take the money and run." So I did. So, but I remember when they said, how many final programs do you want? I said, "Oh, yeah, I have 10 then, just see if they buy it." And they sent me 10. And my dear friend Ian Refalo, Maltese Hammer, rang me up. He said, "Oh, can you get me a program?" He said, "I'll send you the money for it." I said, "No worries, I've got it covered. They're sending me a load of freebies, and because I'm writing in it again." And he said, "Oh, great." And he said, "Oh, you will sign it, won't you?" And I thought he was joking. So anyway, the thing came in, and I couldn't find his address, so I rang him up. I said, can I have your address, mate? I've got a programme to stick in the post for you. And he said, yeah, fine. He says, please sign. You will sign it though, won't you? You have signed it, haven't you? And he was, so it was worth a tenner, I think. And then I signed it, and instantly became worth threepence. So,
what about stuff that you did have and that you no longer possess? Is there anything there?
As a kid, those of a certain age remember Bobby Moore had a sports shop right opposite the bowling ground there.
Yep.
And my well, it's not an aunt because we weren't related, but the woman who lived across the road from us in Alliance Road in Plaistow, Sylvie Nunn. And
a good old East End name, and it's Sylvie.
Sylvie Nunn used to live in Alliance Road, and she had two kids, Mark and Janine. Janine was my first girlfriend when I was about 5. Yeah, so, and she used to work in Bobby Moore's sports shop, and it was my birthday, and she bought me a pair of shin pads from there, little old fashioned shin pads, 1960 shin pads, which Bobby Moore signed on the back to Gordon, best wishes, Bobby Moore. Boy, do I wish I had those now.
What did you do with them? Do you any idea? Did you just threw them out when they got too small, or something?
I mean, we moved from Plaistow to Grays. I had them in Grays. We moved from Grays to Hampshire when I was 13, and I think somewhere in that move, they were too. Well, they were probably a bit big for me then, but that's only because I wasn't a very tall 8-year-old or whatever however old I was. So, I do wish I kept those, obviously. And of course, I've still got the weirdest one of all, the signed can of San Miguel Lager.
Oh, of course. How can we forget that?
Where Adrian had bought sort of crates of the stuff, hadn't it? There must have been about 60 or 70 cans just lying around the press room that day.
Yeah, very generous of him. That was very generous.
He bought beer for everybody in the press. To celebrate West Ham beating Tottenham for the third time in the season. We were down there to do the end of season awards.
That's it.
And while they were out training, we said, "What's all these beers lying around?" And it was Laura was still at the club then. She said, "Oh, Adrian bought them." And she said, "Help yourself," because none of the press seemed to be interested. So I stuffed my bag full of them and managed to get to sign one of them. So
I don't know how I didn't end up with any of those at all, but they must have gone somewhere. But anyway,
left.
there wasn't there? I still remember there being a couple of quotes, but good stuff anyway. Bobby Moore signed shin pads. That's a pretty good one. We've got Brizzy's Dean Ashton signed boots and his Avram Grant signed team sheet. Probably
we could get a whole kit out of this, shouldn't we?
Category really of quality merchandise. Pinky, coming over to you, buddy. What's your favourite bit of West Ham or otherwise memorabilia from the world of football?
Oh, it's a treasured possession. It's one I hope to hand down through the family, through generations if I can. And picture the scene. It's one of the playoff finals. We're driving down to Cardiff. Phone rings Friday afternoon. With PA on the phone. How you doing? Yeah. We've had a disaster, she says. Oh, well, what's up? Thinking there's something wrong with the business. So no, we've been dreadfully let down by, sadly now, the late Justin Edinburgh, who was due to do the awards at the Little Thurrock Dynamo Awards presentation tonight. And without wishing to speak ill of the dead and all the rest of it, I said, well, that's what you get if you spend most of your career at Tottenham. You're going to let people down. And she said, yeah, she said, and the phrase that will stay with me forever. But they've replaced him with some old duffer I've never heard of.
Yeah.
Oh, who's that? She said, it's a bloke called Alan Devonshire.
No way.
And I'm there and I'm thinking, right, okay, don't swear at her, don't shout at her. I say, look, oh, how very interesting. Would you mind just getting his autograph on my behalf? Just make the bloke feel good. Yeah, make him feel that someone likes him. And so I have the Little Thurrock Dynamo Awards presentation, order of service, so to speak, with Dev's autograph on it. And to this day, my PA still clueless as to really who he was and who he is. And there you go. It's the nature of sport, You know,
What
you're a
about-
hero to someone, a zero to others. So
Exactly.
that's buried deep in the attic somewhere, but I'll never throw it out.
Is there anything that you don't have anymore that you used to love, perhaps as a kid? Something you've thrown away that you think, oh, I wish I'd kept that now?
Yeah, I had I mean, back in the 70s, they were all the rage. You know these silk scarves that you used to get?
Oh, yeah.
For some reason, I think the very first thing I ever had was a silk scarf of West Ham United.
Yep.
And you're thinking, why the hell would anyone have a silk scarf with West Ham United on it? But I was always a bit attached to it at the time, and I don't know where it went. I don't know where it disappeared to. Probably with some crusty socks underneath the old bed, you know, when I was about 12. And draw your own conclusions. But you know, it just disappeared one day,
Oh.
and that was it. You know, I can only assume the dear old mum threw it out.
Parents, eh?
So there you
Parents. So we have Dean Ashton's boots, Bobby Moore signed shin pads, and a little Thurrock Dynamos program signed by Alan Devonshire. Some cracking stuff here. Rio, can you top any of that? What have you got for us, buddy?
Okay, the stuff that I've still got, I'm not sure where, but I've definitely got them. My late uncle used to work for News International in a security office.
Yeah.
Boo! He's still getting a boo.
Wait for it. Yeah, I discovered one day that they was going to chuck away a lot of our photographs, like from the press archive, and he liberated them, so to speak. And amongst the, like, there are loads of cricket ones, which I'm a big cricket fan, so I took me pick of those.
Yeah.
But also amongst them were some genuine press photographs from the 1995-86 season.
Yep.
About 4 or 5 pictures, which are absolutely glorious. And once we do move to a nicer abode than I live in at the moment, they're going to be framed and put on the wall somewhere. So yeah, they're my prized possessions. Just that.
Any particular? Are these posed pictures or sort of match? Live shots kind of
match
thing?
shots. There's one
Okay.
definitely of Bobby Martin celebrating his hat trick against Newcastle.
Yeah.
There's one of Ray Stewart after a penalty. There's about 4 or 5 that I found amongst them all, which I'll never part with them. Never in a million years.
And what about something that once again that you wish you'd kept that you had as a kid that you perhaps don't have anymore?
Well, this is a bit of a strange one. I don't know if these items exist anymore. Right? When the centenary stand got built, obviously North Bank demolished at the same time.
Yeah.
The company I worked for supplied the concrete to build a new centenary. So, obviously, the boys who worked in the concrete labs, I worked in the lab that dealt with road surfacing next door.
Yeah.
But the concrete boys, knowing I was a massive West Ham fan, I just went to them one day, if you're going to get something, can you try and bring me back something from like the demolition scene? Oh, yeah, we'll do it, mate. So I was expecting a little chunk of terracing about, say, that big.
Yeah.
4 hours later, 2 of them have lifted out the back of the van this huge slab of the North Bank. A little bit of paint on the front. And like, when I say huge slab, like there are 2 hefty lumps, these geezers. And they brought it out the back of the van and went, there you go, mate, we found that. Are you happy with that? I went, I'm happy with it. How am I going to get bloody well home? But they also gave me a sample cube of the concrete used in the construction of the centenary stand. Now, managed to get them both home, residing around my mum's at the time.
Mm-hmm.
3 or 4 years later, I met my now wife. We decided to move in together. Now, for some strange reason, I still can't quite fathom why, she wasn't keen on having this massive lump of North Bank and a concrete cube from the centenary stand.
Weird.
And I was just, where
Women.
did they get the ideas from? I said, I don't get it. So I believe the items are still around my mum's house, but I can't verify it. I don't know.
So,
parents, they might have chucked it away. Whether the other one,
I'm intrigued by this, Rio. What kind of size are we talking roughly of North Bank? I mean, how big a section are we looking at here?
I think I'd safely say 3 people could have stood on the width of it.
Yeah.
And there's a bit of depth to it as well. It wasn't just a little bit. It was big. Now I can't imagine how she would have chucked it on me. my dad, because my dad's got a massively bad back. How are they going to get rid of the Potsy thing? So I'm praying it's still around there. But,
well, I think this is a story we need to keep tabs on in the coming months and years. The search for the missing part of the original North Bank. So do let us know if you find out if the folks have still got it there at home. We'd love, and of course, if we can get a picture, that would be even better. But that is a quite remarkable piece of memorabilia. That's superb. Thank you for that one. On my part, I was trying to think about this earlier, and I was recounting recently on another one of our podcasts the story of how I liberated, shall we say, the Slaven Bilic's drinks bottle from the very final press conference, West Ham against Manchester United, which is probably one of my favourite little items. As I said, it's clean now. I've also actually, Rio, it's funny you should talk there about those old press photos, because I received a batch of those many, many years ago, and I can't for the life of me now forget what the source was. But again, it was some stuff from Fleet Street, action shots that had been taken and just dumped in at an archive somewhere that had again been liberated by somebody, which I'm quite fond of. And talking about stuff you've got in storage, again, when I was going through the loft the other day, I found loads of signed photographs that I didn't even know I had. One from Ray Stewart taking a penalty, Tony Cottee, which was a photograph of remember his first goal against Tottenham, 1983, I think it was, wasn't it, on his debut when he was 17, a signed version of that. So like you, when we get to the new place, they're all going to go up on the wall, hopefully. In terms of stuff that I wish I still had, I'm a bit of a hoarder, really, so there isn't an awful lot I've managed to lose over the years, but I think the two things that I really wish I'd kept were two old shirts, and one would be the original, like the V shirt that we've got now, or the that version of it, but the original 1976 to 1980 home shirt, and that beautiful claret and blue Adidas shirt that we wore from 80 to 83, I think it was. The following one, which I had as a youth, I suppose, or a young teenager, but sadly, that's gone to the great tip in the sky now.
Actually, I've got one for Rio. Knowing Rio as I do, and knowing favourite players down the years, I do have a match worn, and not just by the player himself. I also had signed Steve Potts shirt.
Ooh, don't tell him. He'll be round.
I'm just going to roll something up. I might not be able to see it. All right? You can't see it, Dave. My missus bought me a Steve Potts cushion a couple of years back. With it every night.
Graham will remember this. Both Graham and I both used to turn out for the supporters side, and every season or so we'd write to the club saying, "Can you help us out with some old kit?" And they would chuck us the old shirts that were being chucked away, the match worn shirts, and we got to the end of one season where we were getting new kit, and just to raise funds, the club said, right, well, if you want to buy one of these shirts, and Potts was one of the ones left, so I thought, well, I'll have that, A, because it's Potts, B, because it will really irritate Rio if I've got this shirt, and then a few years later, I can't remember the lovely lady's name, the poor lady who passed away, who worked
Gina Allen. Gina.
Yeah. There was a benefit thing that was put on the East Ham Working Men's Club, and Potsy was turning up to that, so I turned up with a shirt and got it signed. So
I remember that kit well, because I used to wear the number 6 shirt, which was emblazoned with Bobby Moore's name.
Yeah.
And some bugger had it off before I had a chance to bid, and I'd love to know who had that away, because I'd love to have kept that one. But yeah.
As I recall, did the number 3 shirt have the name "injured" on the back?
That was a guy called Dan Hart, who was pretty much permanently cropped. A good friend of mine who now lives up in Hull, totally incidentally. But happy days, happy days indeed.
Up in Leeds, I saw that.
Yes, that's it. Yeah, memorabilia. There it is. Our favourite West Ham and football bits and bobs that we've picked up over the years, and of course lost. We've had Steve Potts signed shirts, Little Thorough Dynamos programme signed by Alan Devonshire. Bobby Moore signed shin pads, and Dean Ashton, a white Dean Ashton boot, no less, not just any old Dean Ashton boot. And of course,
Don't
probably
forget
the best
beer
and
can.
most valuable one is the Avram Grant signed team sheet that Bristol Hammers treasures, of course. And I'm not sure whether he takes that to bed with him also every night, but I wouldn't be surprised anyway. There you go. That's our little memorabilia section. Moving on very quickly, something else that many of us treasure are our memories of watching West Ham on the road. We've all travelled far and wide in pursuit of a lovely bit of football and one of those glorious away wins that seem to be few and far between as the years go by. But I just wanted to ask everyone what their worst or least favourite trip has been over all the years that they've been travelling. I'll kick this one off, actually. 1989 was the year. We were playing against Coventry in Highfield Road when they used to play there. And for those of you that have travelled to Highfield Road in the past, you'll know it's not one of those grounds where the station was, pretty much right next door to the stadium. You used to get off at Coventry and you were marched down the hill by the Midlands Constabulary for, I think it was about a 25-minute walk, if I remember rightly. Yeah. This particular day, it was pretty cold and foggy, and we got to the ground, and by the time we were allowed in, you could only see, vision was reduced to the halfway line, and these days I'm fairly certain it's one of those matches that would have been cancelled, especially if it was on TV. But the game proceeded to go ahead anyway, and it really was the case that for the next 90 minutes, once the ball crossed the halfway line, us being in the away end behind the goal, of course, once the ball crossed the halfway line, you couldn't see anything that was happening, and you had to go by the cheers that were coming from the opposite end of the ground to see what was happening. As it transpired, there weren't that many cheers because it was an absolutely dreadful game of football. It finished 0-0. My two abiding memories are, firstly, being let out of the away end, and halfway up on the way back to the station, there used to be a big park, like a municipal park, on that march back, and it was always a place where back then you were likely to get jumped by the home fans in the days when there was a little bit more aggression around than perhaps there is these days. And on this particular occasion, there was a huge, what they call, off between Coventry and West Ham fans, and all I can remember is being split up from my friends and everyone scattering in opposite directions, trying to, find their way back to the rest of the crowd. And it was complete mayhem. So you can imagine the scene. We'd had that dreadful game and then that happened. But I think my most abiding memory from that game was at half time. There was a guy standing behind us in the away end, and I can still picture it now. He turned round and looked up to see what was going on behind him. The Coventry fans were situated in the tier above, and you saw it almost in slow motion. A big fat mince or meat pie emerge from the Coventry section of the ground, and it just landed between this guy's eyes and spread all across his face. And I can just remember thinking back on that, thinking, of everything that happened that day. Imagine being, 120 miles or whatever it was away from home and being covered in a hot, sticky meat pie and not being able to clear it off your face.
I'm salivating.
I was going to say, that's your Saturday night, Peter.
Yeah, you're describing this as if it's a bad thing, Graham. I mean, that's almost a dream come true.
That's
people chucking pot pies at you. Bloody hell.
No, they threw it at him and it landed squarely between the eyes. To his credit, he didn't scream or cry out. It must have hurt because it was, you could see the steam rising from the pyres in the mist. But not one of my finest days out. Rio, over to you. Worst ever away trip, and why?
I because I'm going to see West Ham, I'm invariably spending times with friends and family. I can take positives out of everything. My last ever trip to the Manor Ground was close to being an absolute abysmal.
Yeah.
But the 21st of March 2004 is just one of them days that I just wish would swallow me up and spit me out and never enter my mind again. Christian Daly had a nightmare, surrounded on three sides by about 12,000 untrained chimps, held in pens outside the ground for about an hour before and an hour afterwards. Oh, God. You couldn't get a beer for it until about 3 hours after the game because of the New Den, March 2004. We lost 4-1. Don't ever make me live that again.
I remember it well because I was with Chalks on that particular game, and my firm, for some reason, I guess just because they were purely cheapskates, had corporate tickets in the Millwall homestand, and we sat next to Frank Maloney, or who he's not called Frank Maloney anymore, is he? I think he's undergone gender reassignment, and I think he's called something different now. But I think it was Frank. But we were sat next to him, and four of his like henchmen, almost as if they were. And as soon as Millwall scored their first, I think Cahill scored a couple that day, didn't he?
Yeah.
As soon as they scored their first, they clocked immediately that we were West Ham fans, and they spent the next 90 minutes incessantly taking the rise out of us. So that was a particularly unpleasant day. But anyway, I digress. Thank you, Rio. Yeah, that was an awful day out for everyone concerned. Pinky, what about you? You've obviously travelled far and wide. You go to pretty much every away game still. You must have seen a few stinkers in your time.
Yeah, and for me, it was the day of shame. The day of shame, and that was 5th of January 2014. The 5-0 away defeat at Nottingham Forest.
Ooh.
A game that we fielded 11 players, a good 7 of whom, if they delivered pizza to me here tonight at home, in fact, that's probably what most of them are doing, I wouldn't recognise them. You know, I mean, that's how obscure the starting lineup was. You know, it wasn't a case of the Forest fans, as the names were being read out, going, who? Our supporters were going, who? Yeah. And we got turned over 5-0. And the context being, we had a League Cup semi-final due 3 days later.
Against City,
so,
that one.
Sam, you know, we'd had something like, we're in a programme of 6 games in 16 days, and every manager trots out that, you know, I'm running out of players, got to prioritise, blah, blah, blah. But a competition that we've won, you know, a trophy that we've won, and West Ham United turn up for the 3rd round of the FA Cup and put out what amounted to a youth team. And we got turned over by Nottingham Forest 5. And I think that the car on the way back from that, and a car full, you know, I think the C word was probably the only word getting used. So we travelled then 3 days later to City, yeah? And it was a horrible journey for whatever reason. I think the M6 was blocked, and, you know, we just had a nightmare. So we're relatively late in arriving, and we're just piling out the car just as they're reading out the City team sheet, you know, team views. And 4 of us just looked at each other and go, let's just clear off back home again now. And we said, no, we've come, we'll watch the game. 6-0 we got done. Yeah. And the funny thing that night was, having been done 5 by Forest, every photographer at the City of Manchester Stadium were behind our goal in the first half. Every single photographer. There wasn't one behind the City goal. You know, the Fleet Street had voted with their sort of ready reckoners. They go, the action's going to be down the West Ham end, and they weren't wrong. And just the comedy moment of watching them all at half time, changing ends, because they thought, well, here we go. They've been stuffed in the first half. They get stuffed again in the second half. And I think it was across those 2 games that any last shred of credibility that Sam had kind of disappeared, because to me, I'd rather we didn't enter the competition rather than not take it seriously. And 5-0 away, Forest, is a day of shame for West Ham United, and one that it's an embarrassment that it's there forever. You know, so, you know, Blair Turgot, you know, Matthias Fanimo, George Moncur, you know.
Do you want the whole team? Oh, you've got the team there? Have you got the whole?
Yeah, you know,
you've got the team
young Danny Potts.
Yep.
Sorry?
I was just saying, have you got the team right in front of you there? I've got the.
Yeah. I'm looking at it here now, and
Take us through
the
the
only
whole.
players you'd have heard of,
Yeah.
Adrian in goal. Right, Adrian in goal.
Yeah.
Diarra, Potts, Driver, Jarvis, Downing, Whitehead, Moncur, Letget, Maiga, Morrison, Fanimo, Burke, and Turgo. Were the players that night, and or that afternoon, and it's kind of like, why bother?
Yeah.
Why bother? What can you do?
I'm trying to actually remember. I'm looking at that team there, and you know what? I'm trying to remember who Danny Whitehead was. Bearing in mind this was only 6 years ago, and I'm just looking at. I do remember now, he came to us from Stockport, didn't he? Yeah. I'm just looking at his career history, and after that was his only game for West Ham. Of course, Pinky, as you'll know, he wasn't the only one. I think that. Whose sole appearance was that on that occasion. But after West Ham, he's now 26, Danny, still playing football. He's playing for Macclesfield at the moment. And between West Ham, his path from West Ham to Macclesfield was Accrington Stanley in 2015. He went to Macclesfield in 2015, a bit later. In January 16, he was off to Wigan on a free transfer. He then went back to Macclesfield on loan. He also spent time at Cheltenham on loan. He signed for Macclesfield in 2017 on a free transfer. A year later, joined Salford on a free transfer, and he's now back at Macclesfield yet again on loan from Salford. So Danny Whitehead. I wonder now. There's a subject, isn't there, for another show? The one-hit wonders, I guess we could call them. All those Hammers who only ever featured for the club on one occasion. Just while we're on that, can anyone think of any big ones? Rob Jones? Yes, yeah.
Terriccio, who may have played in that aforementioned Millwall game.
20 odd minutes, wasn't it? Yeah. That's a good one. Briz, any ideas? I know Rob Jones played against Joker, wasn't it, in the Intertoto?
Yeah, away leg, yeah.
And that was it.
Simon Webster, maybe. I can't remember how many games he played for.
He managed to limp through a couple of games, I think, Webster. But we had a couple.
Brian Montenegro.
Yes, Brian Montenegro. Yeah, would be another one.
Richard Hall, I'm thinking, but he had a couple of games as well before.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. I'll do a bit of research for next week, and perhaps we'll have a look at some of the best and worst of those. But a dreadful day, Pinky. Anyway, and a blight.
And you go through the whole thing. Supporters had paid hard-earned cash. Travel, they bought the ticket.
Yeah.
Forest fans, big day for them. The famous West Ham United turn up.
Yeah.
Probably their biggest day since they won the European Cup. Because I'm going to say that, aren't I? And they get to see our youth team, and probably not even regulars for the youth team. And it's kind of like, when people talk about how do you revitalise the cup, they'll stick out your first team.
Yeah.
It's that simple. It's not hard. It's not difficult. But if clubs won't take it seriously, why would supporters? And the supporters took their revenge 10 days later in the second leg of the League Cup semi-final. And, we've been turned over 6-0 in the first leg. Second leg, 14,000 turn up. There you go. You field weakened teams. That's what your supporters will repay you with.
Was it 3-0 that second leg, Pinky? If I remember rightly, is that right?
Yeah.
3-0,
so, yeah.
We lost 9-0 on aggregate. Yeah, we just managed to keep it inside double figures. Horrendous stuff. Terrible.
I've pictures of Sam probably presenting to Sully, saying it's an improvement. He's probably got a graph showing, look, if we played them 19 times, we'd get a draw. Kind of thing. But it's that kind of thing that drives supporters mad when you
and of course
when you don't even try to win games. And so we threw an FA Cup tie in the belief we were going to give Man City a game.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, it was broadcast live across the nation for the entire country to see as well, wasn't it? It was on ITV that day. Thanks, Pinky. Breeze, what about yourself? What gives you nightmares when you look back at the games you've watched West Ham play on the road?
West Ham Stockport, where Dowie scored the own goal.
Oh, now there's
dreadful
the
run.
game.
Weather was awful, stadium was awful, travel was awful, just about everything was awful. Traveling all that way to see that nonsense, oh my God, it was awful. It just gives me nightmares even now. And it wasn't even my worst away. My worst away game was I went to watch England play, and I was with the school, and I got arrested at the age of 15 at Wembley. 2 coaches sat in Wembley car park waiting for me to get bailed by the teacher.
Yeah.
It was a bit innocuous. It was all kind of it was against the Republic of Ireland at Wembley. It was all kind of pro-IRA stuff from the Republic of Ireland fans. We were there. We were getting coined all match. It was, it was kicking off in the toilets. I walked out of the kind of entrance right next to some Irish fan who'd been giving me jip all through the game. We got into a bit of a tussle, and a police officer on a horse. I had hair at the time. Him grabbed me by the hair on the horse, dragged me back, put me in this porter cabin, and I had to wait there for one of the teachers to come up and get me out on bail to come out of the bloody porter cabin. And we're back to the coach, and I promised I wouldn't ever do it again. And oh God, nightmare. And then all the parents waiting back at the park when the coaches got back about 3 hours later than they should have been. And I kind of trudged off head down. And kind of infamous. That was an awful trip. But the Stockport game for me was the biggest West Ham nightmare.
The Stockport game, of course, Ian Dowie levelled the scores, didn't he? Julian Dix scored first 22 minutes. Was it a header? I think it was a header, if I remember rightly.
Header from Dowie, a brilliant one.
Well, of course, Dowie's. And it was only like 60 seconds later. Who scored the winner? Ex-Southend boy as well? Remember?
Brett Angel.
Brett Angel, that's right. Yeah, Brett Angel scored the winner. Ended up at Everton, didn't he?
Yeah.
I think he went to Everton and flopped there, didn't he, quite badly. But the West Ham team that night, Ludo Miklosko, Mark Reaper, Bowen Bilic, a guy called Bilic, and Dix, both in the team. Obviously Dix because he scored. Mark Hughes, Ili Dumitrescu, John Moncur. Interestingly, the younger Moncur, Pinky, was in the team at Forest, wasn't he, in the game we've just spoke about. George, his son George. Ian Bishop, Hugo Porfirio. Now, there was a lovely player. And, of course, the one and only Ian Dowie, who scored what is still considered to be by many the greatest own goal of all time. Thank you, Briz. Gnome, finally to you on this one. Once, again, you've travelled quite extensively over the country following the mighty Hammers. What was your worst ever away day?
I'm kind of with Rio on this, that there's usually some sort of redeeming feature. You've had a few beers with mates or something going on, but it's not that long. It's a few seasons ago where I drove up to Hull away and decided to drive for some reason. Can't remember why. But I like to get up to where we're going fairly early and get the car parked, so I've not got to worry about scrabbling around for a space or anything. So I got up to Hull. It must have been about 10 o'clock in the morning, and parked up. Usual car park, great, and a bit peckish, so I'd left early. So I went. I had a breakfast in Wetherspoons, and about halfway through, I'm thinking these sausages taste a bit iffy, and anyway, we got through the game and we lost. I can't remember the score for the life of me, but it was an atrocious performance. And then obviously I had the 200 miles, whatever it is, to drive back, and my stomach was churning over from this dodgy breakfast. I remember distinctly texting you when I was stuck in traffic, sort of trying to get out of Hull.
Yeah.
And I think I just texted the words something like 400 miles. I've got the trots.
Yeah.
I've got 200 miles to go, and no goals, no points. I'm thoroughly pissed off, or something like that. Something like that. I just remember texting you just because I figured if I was going to suffer, someone else was going to be moaned at the same time. So, I think you said something back about being stupid enough for going, which I think was a fair comment. But
I guess
but,
so.
I mean, most games you can normally find some redeeming feature, even if the football's rubbish. I mean, like last year's worst away trip for me was Burnley. I had a pleasant lunch with my ex lives up that way, so I had a pleasant lunch with her. But then I bumped into Pinky, and it went downhill from there. And with Roberto and everything. So.
To be fair, it took you forever to get served at the cricket club. You know, and I think we had to settle for halves because we'd have missed kick-off by that stage. But could I just mention Palermo away was another spectacularly bad trip.
Yes.
How was I to know that Naples was so far away from Sicily? Because in my Let's Pocket diary, it was only 2 inches. And I thought, that can't be that far.
It's a long walk.
So we got off the plane in Naples, and my mate who was with me said, right, well, what's the next bit of the plan? I said, what plan? I said, you know, we're in Italy, and now we've just got to figure out how we're going to get to Sicily. So we thought, okay, let's do some research. We went down to the ferry terminal, and just by chance, we saw, like, you know, Sicily, Palermo. Oh, I will jump on that boat. And you think about sometimes what the lads were saying there about there's always something good. We'd paid about 12 quid to get a cabin on this ferry. And as we're sailing out of Naples harbour at sunset, yeah, and, you know, Vesuvius in the background, it's $1 million view.
Mm-hmm.
And we're thinking, how lucky is this? We're going to go and watch, you know, West Ham United play. And they had this singer on the boat who was singing that bloody awful Dido song all the way across the Med. I will go down with this ship. And I'm thinking, I'm going to die at a fucking car ferry. Don't go to watch West Ham play. We rock up in Palermo, and I'm a bit naive. And I'm there with my West Ham colours on. Okay, I'm a West Ham baseball cap. Apparently not really the done thing to do when you're in Italy. Turn up in Sicily in your own team's colours. And we got out towards the stadium early doors, and we got the kids on scooters circling us. And my mate who was with me said, we're going to get a kick in here, son. I said, yeah, it's not looking good, this, is it? And so we dived into a local bar. This is right near the Palermo ground. And I'll never forget the look on the barman's face as he's given us the, are you out of your effing minds, lads? Look, this Italian fella. And we look around the walls of this bar, every square inch is covered in Palermo memorabilia. Yeah, and we're thinking, oh shit, we've gone into exactly the wrong bar at the wrong time. And fair play to the barman, you know, he could see the horror on our face of like, we're going to die here. And he just handed us a couple of free beers, shoved us in the back, and just basically said in Italian, sit there quietly and you might get away with it. And for about an hour and a half, we were sitting there cacking ourselves as more and more Palermo supporters were pouring into this bar. In the end, a couple of our lads, we got the message out on text and what have you, like, safety in numbers, lads, can come and some of you come and dig us out. And half a dozen boys came in, dragged us out the bar and what have you. Just thinking, I said to my mate, I said, you know, I kind of regret wearing my colours now. And he just looked at me, and I'm sunburnt, you know, carrying a few pounds, usual stuff, cargo pant shorts, you know, pot-bellied shirt stretched around it. And he just said, you fucking think look Italian? Yeah, well, fair play, actually. It's not the shirt that's giving it away, is it? And that was a difficult trip. And at least our lot turned up. You know, my local pub's got a great photograph of our boys all in the cage in Palermo, thousands of us. And a few weeks later, there's a picture of Newcastle United supporters. There must have been about 30 of them. And that's the difference.
Yeah, that's quite...
No wonder the lads in Saudi Arabia didn't want to buy them in the end. Yes. Small club. Nothing.
There's quite a famous picture, that, isn't it, with the two right next to each other, the full cage of West Ham fans, and it's virtually empty of Newcastle. But of course, for those, I didn't make that particular trip, but I'm not sure there's anyone who went out there who didn't have a particular tale of, shall we say, the home fans taking liberties on that particular trip.
Hadn't we done something crass like referring to them as the mafia or something like that in one of the programs, or am I?
Yeah.
Yeah. What it was, Gordon, was for the home leg. A lot of our lads had bought sort of like cheap sort of market stall T-shirts with, you know, mafia slogans on it. And before we played them at their place, the mayor of Palermo had stood up and said what a disgrace it was that all honest Sicilians were being caricatured as mafioso, and, you know, they were honest, hard-working Italians, you know. And then as their third goal went in that
See
night,
that
I think they
Mayor's
started
election
singing a song to the tune of The Godfather. You know.
Yes. Anyway, there you go. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Some superb memories of some pretty damn awful away trips. So perhaps we'll talk about our favourite ones in the next few episodes or so, just to balance it up a little bit. But I'm going to bring tonight's show to a close now. A couple of things we wanted to touch on. We're going to push them over to next week, I think. But we're going to wrap up tonight with a look at the KUMB Awards. It's the 23rd annual KUMB Awards taking place this week. 12 categories for you, the viewers and readers, to vote on once again. We are going to be concentrating tonight for the final section of this particular mod pod on the best and worst signing awards. There are 10 players up for selection, although this is a pretty damn close category between one or two either way. Really, I'm going to run through the selections. I'm very going to quickly come to each one of you and ask for who you would or you have voted for. I'm presuming you've all voted, of course. So the choices for best and worst signing are Albion Ayeti, Jared Bowen, Gonzalo Cardoso. Gnome, give me that proper pronunciation.
No.
Okay. Pablo Fornals, Roberto Jimenez.
Struggle.
What about this one? Roberto Jimenez Gargo, known as Roberto.
There is a very short pronunciation for that one, but I'm not going to say it.
Yes, not sure it begins with an R. Sebastian Haller, David Martin, David Moyes gets a shout, Darren Randolph and or Thomas Souček. Briz, I shall start with you. Your best signing, first of all, out of that lot?
I thought it's been a revelation. I thought he's got bags of potential, and I think he's going to be a big player for us.
I missed that, buddy. Sorry, who did you say?
Sorry, Jared Bowen.
Bowen. Okay, yeah. Good stuff. And your worst, should I ask? Dare I ask?
It's the goalkeeper, isn't it? The goalkeeper from Roberto.
Roberto. Yes, indeed. Thank you, Briz. Gnome, best signing for you this season?
Souček. Souček for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
One for Bowen and one for Souček. And your worst?
Roberto Jimenez, whatever his name was. I can't remember the rest of it. But by the time I got to the end of his name, he'd let in another one. So
yes. Pinky, your best signing this season, please.
Souček.
Another one for Souček. And your worst?
Roberto.
Of course, it's
a bit of a spot for him because just the way he threw the ball into our net at Burnley.
Yeah.
I mean, it was done with such aplomb. Such, it was all you could do was laugh,
about that,
and we did.
Yeah. The funniest thing about that throwing the ball in the net was the funniest thing about that throwing the ball in the net was the referee couldn't believe he'd done it and instigated a VAR check.
Yes.
Surely he couldn't have done that. There must have been a foul. He couldn't have done that. And when he looked, and there wasn't anyone within a postcode of him.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. So that's 3 for Roberto. Bowen has 1 in the best signing. Souček has 2. Rio, it's over to you as the decider, really. Best signing.
Souček, no question.
Souček again. So Souček takes 3. Thank you. And we're going to have a full house for Roberto.
Absolutely. He sucked the life of our season.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just to quickly, we ran this poll on our social media channels earlier today, and just quickly to tell you what the rest, we had about 1,000 votes in each one, and 93.2% voted for Roberto as our worst signing. I guess the only surprise there is that 6.8% voted for anyone else. 4.2% going for Ayeti, 1.5% going for Haller, presumably on the basis that he cost £45 million and only scored, was it 6 or 7 goals? I can't, something like that. Anyway,
7, I believe. Yeah.
7 goals. And coming fourth in that poll was Darren Randolph with 1.1%. I haven't really seen enough of him, have we, to really comment. And best signing. Now, I found this quite interesting actually, because I thought this would be quite a bit closer than it actually turned out. But in fourth place was Sebastian Haller with 0.7% out of 900 odd votes. Pablo Fornals is currently in third place with just under 2%. Jared Bowen, as in our poll, the runner. And actually, looking at this, it's quite representative of what we've done here, because with 3 out of the 4 votes going for Souček, which is obviously 75% or so of the panel's polls here, 72.9% have voted for Souček on Twitter, on our KUMB DOTCOM account, with 24.7% going for Jarrod Bowen. So almost exactly echoing it there, which is...
I bet you feel really silly, Briz.
Yes, yes. So, yeah, there you go. So, well, that's it for tonight. If you do want to take part in the KUMB Awards votes, the voting form is up on the site now. You can get to it via the KUMB forum. There's a link to it there. Alternatively, we are running polls 2 every day across our social media channels, which is basically Twitter and Facebook at the moment, which you can continue to vote in as well if you want to do those separately. And the results of that will be revealed next week. As I say, our 23rd annual polls coming up, with Declan Rice, Angelo Ogbonna and Mikhail Antonio really the front runners for the big award, which is the KUMB Player of the Year, something currently held by Lucas Fabianski. I don't think he's going to win it this year, though. But anyway, you never know. You never know. That is about it for tonight. Thank you to everyone for tuning in once again and joining in with the bants. Let us know what you think of the show. You can get in touch with us at modpod@kumb.com. That's our new email address, modpod@kumb.com. I would like to thank my panel once again for joining me, Rio, Bristol Hammer, the Pink Palermo and Gnome. That is it for tonight. Thank you, as I say, for joining us. If you want to get in touch with us before the next show, or you've got any suggestions or comments you want to make about the show, let us know what you think. If there's anything else you'd like us to cover, if you've got any questions for us or anything to do with West Ham or Knees Up Mother Brown, let us know on the KUMB forum. There will be a thread at the top of the general discussion forum on which you can post your comments and thoughts. Until the next episode, we're not going to do none of that nonsense, as Pink says, so I'm not even going to do it. So I'm just going to say it. Come on, you Irons.
Come on, you Irons.
No.